Hi, so I'm here today with Ed. Ed is from Joburg in South Africa, and Ed, you're going to talk to us today about the things that we can do and see around Johannesburg.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I actually wanted to mention a couple of places in Johannesburg which people usually go to. Some are more popular than others. Some aren't really that known. And the first one is Northcliffe. The reason I thought about it first is I actually stay close to it. I only live about 10 minutes away from it. And it doesn't really, I wouldn't say it dominates the skyline, but you can see it from, very far in the city. The problem with Johannesburg is it's very hilly. So you can't really, from one side of the city, you can't really see what's going on in the other side unless you're in a specific position. But generally, if you're somewhere in the north of the city, um, you can see Northcliffe. And when I say north of the city, we have the city center, which is Johannesburg, and then you have Greater Johannesburg, which is what most people who live here refer to if they say Johannesburg. And most of the city, if you actually look at a map, like if you go onto Google Maps and you look at Johannesburg, you'll see the city center is like, kind of a small circle. And then to the north of that, there's a huge, kind of urban area. And really, so the city is really in the southern part of Greater Johannesburg. And so if you're anywhere north of, the city, you can usually see Northcliffe. And it's prominent because it's by itself. It's not part of a larger ridge. There are a lot of I don't know what to call them, not really mountains, but ridges in Johannesburg. And there's a ridge that really runs through the city from east to west, south to north. But it's continuous, so you don't really notice it. And the city is kind of on top of it. And that's why it's so hilly. But Northcliffe is prominent. It stands kind of by itself, which is why you can kind of see it. And it's quite popular because you can go up there. There's a little pavement which has been paved, and you can kind of see the whole city. It's facing north, so you can't really see the city center. You can a little bit, but because it's a cliff, it's one-sided, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't really I don't even know what the back looks like. It kind of trails off. You can't really see anything. But you can see most of the north, and you can see to the east. And you can kind of see to the south, so you can see the city. So it's a great place, I think, if you first come to Johannesburg and you really want to get a feel for where you are. It's great to go to Northcliffe and to go up there and to see everything because it is quite high, and you can, really see a lot. The reason why it would be nice to go there when you first get to Johannesburg is because Johannesburg is so vast and so big that when you're going kind of from neighborhood to neighborhood, it can almost feel like you're leaving the city and going to a different city. So Johannesburg really has these sub-cities within it, which I'm also going to talk about in a second. So Northcliffe, I go up there often, actually. I like to go up there and take pictures because I live so close to it. For a long time, I didn't actually know that you could go up onto Northcliffe because it's not really obvious how to get there. You the road winds around and twirls, and then it goes to the back, and then you can kind of enter from the back side of the cliff. What's funny is it's actually not the highest point in Johannesburg. The highest point is about a meter higher. But because Johannesburg is such a hilly place to begin with, it doesn't really matter. If you're on Northcliffe, for all intensive purposes, you're on the highest point of the city. And you can see everything. There is another place called Observatory Ridge, which is technically the highest. But because of its layout, you actually can't see that much of the city, at least not as much as Northcliffe. So yeah, that's Northcliffe. Do you have any questions about Northcliffe that you want to ask?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really nice place. It's very popular. There's always somebody there. It's got. I wouldn't say it's very secure, but it's nice because there's a boo and there's a guard, and so they have to let you in and out. People can come and go. You actually only have to press a button yourself, but there's always somebody there. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's super secure, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's unsafe either. And I think you can go there at night as well. I haven't really been there at night. It's something I've been wanting to do, but I haven't done it yet. But it's a great place to take pictures. A lot of people just go up there and hang out. It does get very windy because Northcliffe, the area it faces to the north is kind of flat. and so a lot of the wind hits that cliff. I went there a couple of times during the winter, and the wind is so intense and so cold. I cannot stand being up there for more than 30 or 40 minutes. So it is a very windy place, but it is very high. And that's the reason why.
So it's really nice to get a view of the city from there, and you can sort of get your bearings and work out where everything is.
Exactly, and this leads me on to another point about Johannesburg. Is it's actually quite easy to find yourself in Johannesburg, even though it is so vast, because there are a number of very prominent landmarks which are easy to spot. The two most important ones are two very tall towers, the tallest towers in the city. And I believe they are the tallest structures in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. There's the Hillbrow Tower, which is in Hillbrow, which I think is the tallest one. And then there's the Centec Tower, which is close to the Broadcasting Corporation, close to the head offices or the main broadcasting area of the SABC, which is the South African Broadcasting Corporation.
I think I've seen that one. I think that's always in the brochures. It's really tall, and then it's got like a circle on the top.
Yeah, and it tends to thin out as it goes up. Yeah, so it looks like it's the tallest one. The other one is kind of thick, and it doesn't, it just goes straight up. It doesn't get thinner as it goes up, so it tends to look a little bit bulky. And the other one, because it's getting thinner, it looks much higher, and it's on top of a hill as well. So the SABC, the Broadcasting Corporation, is actually, its headquarters is on a hill, and you drive up the hill, and it twirls around, and at the very top you got the tower. And I guess the tower probably belongs to the station, to the SABC. But the other one is actually taller, I've read. I think only, not by that much, but it's actually taller. So those two immediately, you can see those two pretty much from everywhere. Most of the time, you can see one or the other one, or usually both. They're also quite far away from each other, and that's very helpful, because if you see one, you see the other one, you really know where you are. But at least you know where they are, so you can go to them.
And are these sort of opposite ends of the city as such?
Yes. So the one is actually in the city itself, like in the city center, and it totally dominates the skyline. It's by far the tallest thing around here, and you can see it from pretty much everywhere, with some exceptions, because sometimes, for example, the highway on the southern bit of the city is going between a couple of hills, and like if you're driving there, you won't see it, but usually you can see it from almost everywhere. And like I said, it's in the city center itself, but the Centec Tower is just outside of the city. So if you're leaving the city, within a couple of blocks or a couple of kilometers, you start to get close to that. But they're far enough away from each other that they both dominate the skyline of Greater Johannesburg, but they're far enough away that you can kind of see where one is in relation to the other one.
Yeah.
And then probably the third most prominent landmark behind those two is the Ponte Tower, which is a circular kind of residential tower, which is right next to or very close to the Hillbrow Tower. And you might have seen it. It used to have, 15 or 20 years ago, it used to have a Coca-Cola sign at the top. And at night, it would just light up. You would see it from all over the city. It's round, so it had a round Coca-Cola sign going around the building. It would be white and red. And a couple of years later, it was replaced with a Vodacom sign, which was blue and green initially, and now it's red and white again. So for a number of years, if you search for pictures of Johannesburg on Google, you'll probably at some point see, the tower being red and white, the top part, and then another time it might be green and blue. And that would correspond to the times. I believe it's red and white again, because Vodacom actually changed their logo.
It's the same as our Vodafone logo. Yeah.
Right, I believe it's owned by Vodafone. Yeah.
I presumed it was the same company.
It is, yeah. Well, I think they're the parent company, Vodafone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's actually a popular base jumping spot. It's the only place that I've seen in Johannesburg where people jump off of buildings. And there are a couple of videos on YouTube where you can watch that. It's pretty scary.
Have you done it?
I haven't done it, no. I haven't done it. I'm not sure I would want to. But it does look kind of cool, but it looks very scary.
Mm.
It's interesting to see for me because I've seen the tower probably every day for the whole of my life.
Yeah.
And to see somebody to see it go by, because the one guy had a camera on his chest, I think a GoPro or something, and he jumps off and he does a backflip, and you just kind of see the tower in the background just going like this. And that's an interesting view to see for somebody who's seen the tower their whole life. It's just, to see it from that perspective kind of blew my mind. You would think that the other two towers would be the best places to do that, but they're currently closed off. You can't actually enter into them. So during the apartheid years, there was actually a restaurant in the Hillbrow Tower. So there's a whole complex, like a whole building on top of the tower. And there was a revolving restaurant, which I guess was probably very popular, but it was closed in the 1980s due to terrorism fears. So, I guess it was believed somebody would try to bomb it or something like that. And it was eventually closed and sealed off, and it has actually never been reopened. I don't know if anybody's been up there. Probably people have been up there to do maintenance or something like that. But the general public can't go up there. And there's a brick wall sealing off the whole tower when you actually go to the bottom of it. You can't, there's barbed wire and there's a brick wall. You can't actually even get close to the structure. Which I think is a shame, because if you went up there, it would be the most epic view ever. And I think there has been talk in recent years of them trying to reopen it, but it hasn't really gone off kind of off the floor. So they probably will do it at some point because it's such good real estate. It's just sitting there.
Yeah.
And it could be kind of a good tourist attraction, and even just for locals, people would love to go up there. And probably also for base jumping as well, because it's kind of funny. They jump off of the Ponte Tower, which is next to it, and it's totally dwarfed by the Hillbrow Tower, because it's much higher and it has the whole platform and there's nothing below it. The Ponte Tower is a building, so you have to clear the kind of the floor, or I mean the roof, to make sure you're not going to hit the building. With the tower, you have a whole kind of circular structure which is protruding, and you can jump off of that if you want to jump off of the tower. Which I can imagine most people don't. Yeah. The other one probably wouldn't be so good for that, for base jumping, because it's actually on a hill and there's no real easy landing area, I think. There are a couple of soccer fields close by, but I'm not sure how well it would work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one also, I think it used to have a viewing deck, which is also closed. That one is sealed off as well. And that one, I think, either belongs to, I think it belongs to Centec. I'm not sure if Centec is a private company, but they rent it out to the SABC, or they're probably owned by the SABC in some way, one or the other. But at some point, it's not as fancy as the other one. So the Hillbrow Tower actually had, kind of floors, a restaurant, and a more sophisticated viewing deck. The Centec one, I think, just has an outdoor kind of area where you could just stand on top of it. Yeah, so if they ever opened either one of those two, I think it would be amazing. I think it would be very popular. And I think it's probably going to happen at some point, but it seems like it just hasn't, nobody has really taken it very seriously, I guess. And I'm not even sure nobody knows who to contact, what to do. I think even the government itself is not sure whose domain this is, and so on. Yeah, so that, as far as landmarks go, it will be Northcliffe, those two towers, the Centec Tower and the Hillbrow Tower, and the Ponte Tower, which which is a kind of Johannesburg. If you see a picture of Johannesburg or you see a drawing, often you'll have like a logo of Johannesburg. It'll usually include the Ponte Tower and the Hillbrow Tower. Like those are the two landmarks. Those are the faces of Johannesburg. Generally, just for fun, the types of places that are popular is places like Aldrich City, which is the only real theme park in Johannesburg. That's kind of, if you're talking about going out for a day, and from a tourism perspective, or even just for locals, that's probably one of the more popular places. There is actually a casino. There are a lot of casinos in Johannesburg. Yeah. Which a lot of people come here from places like China and so on, where they don't have that, and they're surprised by how many we have. There are a couple of popular ones in the city. Just briefly, there's Monte Casino in the north, which is a very popular place for eating out. There are a lot of restaurants. It's a very fancy place. It is supposed to mimic Italy. It's one of those casinos that looks like Italy on the inside.
Okay.
So like the floors are paved, and you have like little mini, lakes, and the roof is painted to look like the sky. It's a very popular place for eating out. There might be some nightclubs, and then there's of course the casino itself, and it usually has a hotel on the side. Now, Gold Reef City, which is in the south, is much like that, except it's got a theme park, and so it's a very popular day attraction. People go there to ride the rides. I'm not sure how many tourists go there, but among locals, it's probably quite popular. Um, it's funny because when you talk about tourism in Johannesburg, I don't think the city center really features. People don't come here to go to the city. It's mostly out of Johannesburg, I think, or Greater Johannesburg. The north is where it's all happening, which is the suburban areas. There is a place called Rosebank, which is, if you look at Johannesburg, you'll see the highway goes right around it. So you have the inside part of Johannesburg, which is inside that highway, and then you kind of have the outskirts, which is outside of the highway. And if you were to take that, circular highway as your measuring point for Johannesburg, right in the middle of that, right in the center, is a place called Rosebank. And it's a kind of a business district. It's a mixed business and shopping district, I guess. It's also a very popular place just for hanging out because it's street level. It's not indoor, which is kind of unique because most of the places in Johannesburg, whether it's shopping malls or places where people go to eat, like the casinos I just mentioned, like Monte Casino, it's a self-contained place. It's a building. Or it's several buildings connected to each other, and you go inside and you're in a place. You go through security, you're inside a parking, and then you go into the building. Rosebank is street level. It's one of the places in Johannesburg where if you walk on the street, you'll probably feel like you're in a city now. You're in a city center. It's actually quite small, but because it's so unique, it's very popular. A lot of people go there. There are a lot of street level restaurants. There are some nightclubs and things like that, and then there are several buildings in the area which are office buildings, and there are also residential flats and things like this. The area can be, I wouldn't say it's dangerous, but because it's street level, it's much different from all the other places in Johannesburg, like malls or the casinos. Those areas, once you're, the malls and the casinos, once you're inside of them, you're quite safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't get robbed and so on. But in Rosebank, at the street level, it's possible for you to get mugged. There is generally a lot of security around, especially in recent years, but it's still something you've got to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I've actually been robbed myself in Rosebank. It's the only place in Johannesburg where I was actually robbed, like mugged.
Yeah.
Every other experience I've had with crime was, somebody broke into my house or they stole something out of my bag or something, but actually being confronted and robbed was in a place like Rosebank. At night. So it can be a little bit more dangerous at night, but still not dangerous. Still not a very dangerous place. It's just because it's not, internal. It's not inside a place. It's street level that can happen. It is also not completely street level. There's a mall. There's actually two malls. One of them is called the Zone, and then across the street there's the Rosebank Mall, and they're connected through the street, so you can actually walk. And there's a road that runs right through it that's only for pedestrians. And that's very unique because there's nothing else like that in Johannesburg, as far as I know, where you kind of just pedestrians walk down a road. So that's why it's a very unique place. There's usually all kinds of, kind of art and things being sold there, like African art, like drums and that kind of thing, those little drums there. And on Sundays, there is a flea market. So they convert the whole parking area for the Rosebank Mall, not the whole, but most of it, into a flea market, I think on Sundays, or it's either every Sunday or it's on a Sunday every 2 weeks, or it's the first Sunday of every month, something like that. And people private people go there to sell stuff. And there's usually a lot of art, a lot of food, there's food stalls and that kind of thing. There's clothes, jewelry, just about anything. And that also, it's very popular because there's a lot of foot traffic in Rosebank, because there's the street level pedestrian zone where you can walk. It tends to be quite popular, and it's a very nice place to go on a Sunday, for example. When there's so many people there, it tends to be safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, not being dangerous or anything. I keep mentioning the safety aspect. People are going to think it's very dangerous, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, no, people
Um,
always ask me about safety in South
yeah,
Africa, and as I keep saying, you've wherever you go, you've got to be careful. I mean, we live near
right,
Cambridge. Cambridge is relatively safe. My husband had his mobile
sure,
phone stolen. He's grown up in
right,
South
yeah,
Africa his whole life, never had anything stolen on the street.
right,
Been robbed in his house,
yeah,
but never had anything
right,
stolen on the street. But then has something stolen on the street in Cambridge. So yeah,
right,
you've got to be
yeah,
careful everywhere. I think some places obviously you need to be more aware than others, and I think South Africa is one of those.
yes, definitely.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely. It's not dangerous, but it's dangerous when you compare it to other countries.
yeah.
So yeah, you got to be careful. And the other thing is the criminals will come to the northern part of the city, which is the part of the city which will generally make you feel quite safe.
Hmm.
So the north of Johannesburg, which is the biggest part of Johannesburg, is quite nice. And when you're walking around it in the street or in a mall or something, there's a tendency to think everything is fine and everything is safe because it looks safe, it appears safe. And so the criminals go to those areas to strike. That being said, if you actually went into the city center and hang out there long enough, you would, something might happen to you because that is at the place where, there's not much help around, there's not much policing around. There probably is, but it's so dense. There's so much going on in such a small area that it's kind of hard to police it and control it and know what's going on. In the north, if somebody robs you, it's hard for them to get away because it's easy to look for them. For example, if you're in a neighborhood, there's only so many places they can go, only so many streets. The streets are wide and big, and the next neighborhood is far away. In the actual city center, you have buildings, you have blocks and blocks of street going in every direction, so it tends to be easy to get away. In recent years, the city has improved a lot. There is now a district, kind of an art district, which is called Newtown.
I've heard about it. Yeah.
Yes, it's been redeveloped, and it's actually quite a nice place now. It features heavy security, a heavy police presence, a heavy security presence, private security. And they tend to do a good job of keeping it under control, but it is still in the city center, and it is right next to, the normal city center. In Johannesburg, one thing you have to understand about Johannesburg is the city. Nothing in South Africa is really normal by conventional standards because of our history. And Johannesburg is a good example of this. So during the apartheid years, somebody who was black couldn't live in the city center, or somebody who wasn't white couldn't live there. And yet you had a big area like Soweto, or you had other township areas right outside of the city where people were packed in there. And the moment that they were allowed to live in the city center, they came and they lived there. And this created kind of a unique situation. It's very dense, it's very populated, probably more than it should be. The people who live there probably don't really want to be living there. There's a lot of competition for space. And this creates certain conditions, which can be dangerous. One example of this is the actual tower I was mentioning, the Hillbrow Tower, is in an area called Hillbrow. And it's widely considered to be one of the most dangerous areas in the city, especially in the inner city, because it is very densely packed. And it's actually well developed as a city, as a sub-city. There's a lot of, when you go driving through there at night, there's a lot of action happening. There are people on the sidewalks talking, walking around. There are people selling things. So as a city where people live, it's actually quite well developed, which is why people go there to live. But most people don't really want to live there. And so there's a lot of elements of crime. There's intense competition. There's actually a lot of foreigners. Most people don't consider Hillbrow to be, quintessentially South African, because there's a lot of Nigerians, for example. There's a lot of other Africans, and they, for one reason or another, they tend to do better than the locals, because they probably come here with a lot of money. They save up money. They leave their countries. They come here and then they start businesses. And so they do quite well. And but then there are also the poorer ones. So yeah, it's a mix of everything. I've been through there at night, which is an interesting experience. I've been through there on my bike. It is dangerous, but if you go there, especially if you go there with nothing, you'll probably be fine. So if you want to go into an area like that, and you will see a lot of interesting things if you go there. It will be an adventure. I would recommend don't take anything. Don't even take a cell phone or your wallet. Maybe take some money with you if you want, just a couple of notes. And maybe a card, with a taxi number or something. And if you go there like that, you'll be fine. Because in South Africa, people don't really get hurt or injured for any reason other than they're getting robbed. So if there's violence in this country, there is some social violence, which I'll discuss later. But most of the violence is, somebody got robbed. So they got shot because they got robbed. Or they got stabbed because they got robbed. It's quite the criminals here are they're running a business. They're trying to get money. They're trying to get goods to sell. If they can't get that, they don't care about you. They're not going to waste time on you. They're going to go where they can get that. So you'll probably, if you went to an area like Hillbrow with just nothing, they'll probably be fine. They might take your shoes or something like that, but you'll probably be just fine. But I wouldn't go there unless you specifically wanted to see the place. And if you want to see it, probably be better in the day anyway, because at night there's not much to see. The city's not very lively there at night. There's not lights or anything like that. There is one main street which you can go through, which you might want to just drive through, because there's a lot to see if you're driving through it. But if you're kind of walking, it might be kind of boring. Newtown definitely though is where the nightlife or the main kind of action happening in the city is at night and during the day as well. It's the area which has been the most developed, which has recovered the most from everything that the city has gone through. The overpopulation and all of that. It's been redeveloped well. There are a lot of nightclubs, and I think it's generally fairly safe there. But I think few people really prefer to go there. The people that go there because it's the city center. So they want to be in the city center. They want to go and see what it's like. It can never really be as popular as some of the outlying shopping malls, which is where people generally go when they want to hang out or just shop or something like that. So Rosebank is more of an area where you can feel like you're kind of on a street level city, even though it's incredibly small, especially compared to the city itself. A lot of people go there because it's safer, and you can still get a kind of a feeling like you're in the city. Everything in Johannesburg, when you compare it to foreign cities, seems kind of small scale, and that's because it is. It's a city that is spread out over a large, very vast area, but there's not really much, like if you compare it to London, it's no competition at all. As a street level city where you can walk for blocks and shop at the street level, everything in Johannesburg is, you have everything in this mall here, everything in this mall here, an area there, area here. It's not really a continuous mix of city like you do get in foreign countries like in Japan or in London or wherever else. So again, it's unique because of South Africa's conditions. You have a very nice area which is not far away from Rosebank, and that's called Sandton. And this is the main place in Johannesburg. This is the place where everybody goes. It's the most popular. It's the richest area. I think I read on Wikipedia. I'm not sure how accurate it is because it's Wikipedia, but I read on Wikipedia that it's Africa's richest square mile. And it's also kind of a small area when you compare overseas, but recently it's been growing very rapidly. There are a lot of new buildings springing up. And an example of the unique type of situation that I think only South Africa can produce is you have a very bad area. I think it's probably the worst area in Johannesburg because I've ridden through a lot of these areas. I take my bike and I just go and explore, and I purposefully go through the bad ones with a GoPro to try and see what they're like. And there's a city or a township called Alexandra, which is right behind Sandton City, which is Africa's richest square mile. And it is one of the worst places I've ever been to, and it's one of the worst places I've seen because it is an actual true shanty town. A lot of the bad areas in Johannesburg are famously a place like Soweto. It's not really a bad area, but it's a poor area. This is, kind of a lot of people who otherwise don't know, who haven't been into Soweto, think it's a really bad, messed up place. And I've been there, and it's actually quite nice. The roads are really nice. It's been developing very well. They have normal houses, small, poor houses, but it's not a shanty town. Most parts of Soweto. But Alexandra, the whole place actually is. And it looks really bad. It's really dirty. The streets are not kept up really well, and it's literally behind Africa's richest square mile. If you actually Google Alexandra and Sandton, you will see the buildings in Sandton, kind of in front of or behind the township. And that, I think you cannot really get a situation like that anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess Brazil probably has something like that in Rio.
Actually, yeah, I was watching Fun for Louis videos, and he went to,
right.
I think it was Brazil, Rio, and then he went up to the, I forget what they're called, begins with V.
Favelas.
Yes, that's it, favelas.
Right.
And I just, such a contrast to the rest of the city where he'd been
it's amazing,
around.
yeah. They actually probably do have it even worse than here, because I've seen it there. They have it literally on the city. So you'll have like Rio, and then you'll have, because they have those hills, and then you'll have one coming down, and literally, it's in the city. Yeah. It's not quite like that here, which again, because of our history, it was purposely separated out. Yeah. So if you actually, it's interesting going onto Google Maps and just looking at Sandton and seeing Alexandra behind it. It is a very clear separated out area, which is by design. It was like that. Which you would think it would slowly, kind of creep in, one or the other, the one would creep into the other, and yet no. It's very easy, like here's the start, here's the end.
Yeah.
I've noticed that when I've ridden around on my bike, Sandton, there's a highway between them. I guess that probably helps. You have Sandton, and then you have the highway, and then you have Alexandra. But even on the other side of the highway, between, just south of Alexandra, you have an area which is not bad. And the distinction between Alexandra and that area is very clear as well. It's just a road.
Yeah.
As you would think, a road wouldn't stop people from kind of going and sitting up on the other side, because there is nothing on the other side. In some cases, it's just a field or something, and yet they don't. I don't know if it's if the police kind of come and destroy it as soon as they put it up, or what the case is, but it just doesn't change, which I found very interesting. The fact that it doesn't, and this is the big fear for people in Johannesburg in South Africa, people, kind of middle class people, usually white people. They're always worried that that area is going to come here, it's going to bring the crime, and so on, and yet it just never happens. Yeah. I guess the economics just doesn't allow for it. That's the reality. So a lot of those fears are unfounded. And a lot of these areas just look much worse than they are. That one actually does look quite bad, Alexandra. But Soweto I've been through Tembisa. It's a gradient of bad areas. And Soweto is definitely the most developed one.
Is it the oldest one, Soweto?
It probably is. I'm not sure. Alexandra, I know, is also quite old. It's funny because Sandton City didn't exist before Alexandra. So you had Alexandra, and then you had later on Sandton City. Well, I guess one of the reasons they chose to build Sandton City where they did is because they could make use of the labor from Alexandra quite cheaply. Because people there don't have work. So when they were building Sandton City, it all started with a shopping mall, I think. Somebody came in the 70s and built a huge shopping mall there. And the city kind of developed around that. And it really got a kickstart when apartheid ended, because then all the kind of business capital and all the big businesses fled the city, because the city a massive crime wave swept over Johannesburg in the 90s. Yeah. Again, because of the situation, because people could suddenly move, live wherever they wanted to. There was intense competition, and crimes shot up. And because of that, most businesses and all the kind of capital and everything left the city and moved north to Sandton. And you can really see that today. When you go to Sandton, you can see I don't remember a time in Sandton when I've been in Sandton in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and I'm only 26, where there hasn't been some kind of construction ongoing. It's quite annoying. You go there, you constantly hear the noise. There's always dust in the street. but they're building new buildings constantly, and they're breaking new buildings down and building more new buildings. It's a place which has undergone rapid development, but when I go there, I feel a little bit sad because it almost feels like it's pretend, because the city is so small. It really doesn't compare to anything like London. They cannot, kind of restart everything they had in Johannesburg in Sandton. There's not enough space for it. If you go to the city, if you go to Johannesburg, you'll find a lot of abandoned buildings kind of falling apart. It's a ghost town. It's almost a ghost city. The only real 4 major kind of entities in the city which people know about are the 4 major banks in South Africa. So that's Absa, Standard Bank, First National Bank, and Nedbank. They actually have big, huge skyscrapers which they occupy in the city. But if it wasn't for them, there wouldn't actually be anybody that anybody knew that is still in Johannesburg. And so it's a really weird situation. You have this huge city. If you actually go there and stand there, it's like you're in New York. There are huge skyscrapers, and it's blocks and blocks of skyscrapers. But when you go to Sandton, it's like a few blocks of medium, small size skyscrapers, which you can't even really describe as such. And so it's a kind of a very strange situation, which I think a lot of people, I don't know, at some point people are going to have to move back to the city. Yeah, I think if I'm not sure how that would work because the conditions are so strange. It's kind of put the city in limbo, if you know what I mean, for the last 20 years. People are not really sure, it's spread out more over that time because it's more like LA now. It's a city spread over a vast area with no real CBD. Okay. Because in some cases, Rosebank is the CBD. In some cases, Sandton can be considered the CBD, and then you still actually do have the CBD in the city. So it's because of that, it's a unique situation. So I would say Johannesburg is those 3 points, and it actually goes along the highway. It's the city center itself, which is Johannesburg, Rosebank, and then further along north you have Sandton. And those 3 are kind of the main central part of Johannesburg. So yeah, Rosebank. Sandton is the place which has the big shopping mall, which is, it's got a square with a statue of Nelson Mandela. That is the main tourist place. And that's probably the main place that tourists see when they first come to Johannesburg, because we now have a subway. Before we didn't have a subway at all. When they announced the 2010 FIFA World Cup, which I think was back in 2004, I think one of the conditions for us hosting it is that we would have to build some kind of transportation infrastructure to take all the fans. And so they built this kind of mini subway, which we have now. I think it's only got, in Johannesburg itself, like 4 or 5 stations. But one of them is Sandton, the other one is Rosebank, and then the city centre itself. So that reinforces that line I was talking about. So if you actually come to Johannesburg, you can visit all of these places I've mentioned, except for Northcliffe and the 2 towers, on the subway. So you can kind of, straight from the airport, you can go to the city centre, you can go to Rosebank, and you can go to Sandton. And I think most tourists will probably, the first thing they will see if they'll come to Johannesburg on the subway from the airport is Sandton, probably, because that's where all the hotels are, that's where the big popular shopping mall is, and that's where the square is, which is probably the main tourist attraction in Johannesburg at this point. It's where you can, if somebody asked me where can I just find a lot of tourists in Johannesburg right now, I would go to the square. And it's a typical like European style square. It's got restaurants that surround the square, and it's got staircases, and it's got a statue of Nelson Mandela, quite a big bronze statue. And most foreigners go there, I think. At least that's where you can find a lot of them. And then straight from there, you can go to Rosebank on the subway, which is not that far away, which is more of a street level feel. And you can go to the city centre if you'd like. I probably wouldn't go there on the subway. I would more go there in a car or a taxi, because then you could leave at any time. On the subway, you're kind of at the behest of the schedule, which might only be every half hour or something like that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is some of the less known areas in Johannesburg, like the Chinatown. Even among locals, nobody really knows that much about it. There used to be a Chinatown in the actual city center, which has been dying kind of. Again, due to the conditions there, most people don't go there anymore. So there's a new Chinatown in an area called Cyril Dean, which has been developing very fast. It's actually just one street, but it's a very long street. And they've also been building buildings and everything there. So it's developed quite nicely. It's one of my favorite areas in Johannesburg. I go there often because it's quite a safe street. And there's a lot of action. There's a lot of things going on there. And I was also studying Chinese, so I would try to go there and speak with people. It's just nice. I don't know if a tourist would like it that much because you can kind of a Chinatown you can probably find anywhere. But Johannesburg is unique in the sense that we have two, and this is one of the newer ones. And it's just different. If you're living here, it's just a different place to go than where you might be used to going.
Yeah, I think people are always interested in things like that because I know Chinatown in London's really popular.
Yeah, they tend to be because you can kind of see things that you don't generally see in other places in the city. So if you go to kind of the Cyril Dean Chinatown, Johannesburg, it just feels. When I was walking there, I was like, this was in Johannesburg all this time, and I didn't know about it. I just felt like I discovered something amazing which I'd never known about, and yet it was there for most of the time. Certainly most of the last 10, 15 years, but I just never knew about it. And that is the part of Johannesburg that I actually grew up in, which is central, it's close to Rosebank, is kind of, it's such a large area just by itself that you can live there your whole life and not really know anything about the outskirts. And so the outskirts of Johannesburg are so far away from each other that it feels like you're not even really in Johannesburg. So it's just this vast conglomerate of areas, which kind of loosely held together, and people describe it as Johannesburg, but it's really kind of not. It's separate cities, and even people describe them as separate cities. For example, one of the areas of Johannesburg is a place called Benoni, but it actually has it's a separate municipality. It has its own city hall, and it's far enough away from the central parts of Johannesburg that people just kind of say, oh, I'm from Benoni. They don't even really describe it as Johannesburg, but it's definitely a part of the greater city. But it is an incredibly vast area. And so kind of, that's why I was chose to focus on the city center, Rosebank and Sandton. That is Johannesburg, from a tourist perspective. Once you've explored and experienced that, which is not much, it's not a huge area, but it's just the most popular. There is a lot more to explore on the outskirts and kind of the rest of Johannesburg. And so let me see, what else do I have? Then there are things which are outside of Johannesburg, but where people from Johannesburg tend to go. And one of them is a huge dam called Hartbeespoort Dam. So it's north of the city. It's between Pretoria and Johannesburg. So you have Johannesburg, and then you have Pretoria about 40 kilometers away. And it's to the west, I think, to the west of Pretoria and to the north of Johannesburg. So it's about the same distance away from Johannesburg as Pretoria, but it's to the west of Pretoria, but still to the north of Johannesburg, like Pretoria. And it doesn't take that long to get there by car, usually 30, 40 minutes. It's very big. It's by far the biggest dam around here. Close to the city, close to the north. There is another one called the Vaal Dam to the south. Which is actually much larger, but it's not as quick to get there because it's to the south and it's further along to the south than I think this one is to the north. So a lot of people will go there on weekends. There's boats, there's jet skis. It's around mountains. It's actually a very beautiful place. There's a lot of nature. There's baboons and so on. They'll always steal your food. If you go there with like a picnic or something, probably you're sure to get robbed by the baboons. So it's a very popular place for people in Johannesburg. And then if you continue north quite a bit further, at least 2 hours drive from there is a place called Sun City, which I think is quite famous.
I've heard of that.
Yes.
It looks lovely.
It is an amazing place. People from Johannesburg love Sun City. because it's not that far away. You can go for a weekend, so you can, or even for a day. You could leave at 8 and you'll be there by 10, maybe 10:30, and you can spend the day there. It's this resort. There's it's about as close as you can come to the ocean in Johannesburg. No, it's obviously not a real ocean, but they have one of those fake oceans which actually makes waves.
Valley of the Waves, is it?
Valley of the Waves, yeah. So they've got that, and it's a whole complex which it has that kind of man-made ocean, and then it's got slides and lakes and things like that. There's a beach, kind of a fake beach. It's a little bit ridiculous when I think about it, but it is nice enough that it feels like a real place.
Yeah, it's in a film actually.
Really? Which one?
Blended. Is Adam
Blended?
Yeah, there's Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston star in it, and it came out.
Wow.
It came out last time while we were in South Africa, I think, or the time before. So it's only a few years old. It must be about 2 or 3 years old, I think.
I think it's a popular place for films. I know it was in a Jackie Chan movie as well, a Jackie Chan movie from the late 90s, where you can definitely see it was filmed in Sun City, some parts of it. And that, I think the movie is called Who Am I? So it's a guy who forgets who he is. Yeah. And some of that was filmed in Johannesburg and some of it in Sun City. So Sun City is the place where people in Johannesburg go when they really want to leave Johannesburg and go somewhere else, but they don't want to actually travel far away. So you've only got a day, or you've only got a weekend or a couple of days, and you really just want to get out of Johannesburg and go somewhere. That is where people from Johannesburg go, and it's done well enough that it feels like a real place. The Valley of the Waves, it's in an actual valley of these mountains, not real mountains, but just mini cliffs, I guess, or mini hills. And so it's deep in there. And then the way it's set up, the way it's kind of designed, it really feels like you're in this tropical kind of place. It's almost like Disney World, I guess. I've never been to Disney World, but it's something like that. It gives people that kind of feeling. There's an attached casino, which is kind of prominent. It's large. There's everything there. There's every restaurant, every shop. There's hotels. There's a bunch of different hotels. Kind of cheaper ones, which is just lodging, to 5-star. There's a golf course. There's a dam. There's basically everything there for a nice little holiday. And people tend to go there for short holidays, 1, 2 days, 3 days maybe. If you're there for more than 3-4 days, you'll probably get bored at some point. There's not that much to do. It's more of just a short holiday destination for people from Johannesburg. There are also a lot of people who come there internationally, which I don't really know why. I guess if they come to see South Africa and then they just go to Sun City while they're here. It wouldn't make sense to me for them to come here specifically for Sun City, but that might happen as well. So let me see what else. I think.
Sorry, Ed.
So,
is there
go ahead.
In Sun City? Is there a safari bit as well? So a mini safari?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there's a national park there. I forget what its name is. I think it's Pelani's National Park or something like that, which is really big. And it's just on the north of Sun City. So you I'm not sure if it's one complex or it just happens to be close by. But I guess that's a reason as well. Actually, come to think of it, that's probably why international tourists would go to Sun City, because they can stay at the hotels and then they can go to the park. Yes, so yeah, you tend to forget that. People from Johannesburg tend to forget that because they just go for Sun City. They don't go for the national park so much. But yeah, it's got a national park, and it's also, I think it's on the international golf circuit. So some of the major golfing tournaments, make a stop in Sun City, I think, at some point in the calendar, So yeah, it's far enough that it feels far when you go there, but it's close enough that you can actually go there. So it takes at least 2 hours by car. It's quite a nice scenic drive in some parts, because from Johannesburg to Hartbeespoort Dam is quite nice. It's hilly, it's kind of nature type setup. So it looks pretty good driving out there as well. And you definitely feel like now I'm leaving Johannesburg completely. Yeah, so I think Sun City is definitely somewhere you have to go if you're going there. If you're coming to Johannesburg, it's definitely one of the places to see. But I wouldn't come here specifically for that. I don't think there's enough there to validate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess there's a lot to talk about, but those are the main. If you're coming to Johannesburg, I would definitely go to Rosebank, Sandton, the city center itself, if you can manage it. Even just for a drive through or a drive on the highway, you don't actually have to go into the city, but you can see the city if you drive from the highway during the day, and at night it looks pretty good. Um, and then Northcliffe, I definitely wouldn't miss during the day and at night, even though I've never been there at night. I've wanted to go, and I can imagine it must look spectacular because you can see everything. You can see even, there are these cooling towers close to the airport. I'm trying to remember what the name of the actual power station is. But anyway, there are these cooling towers, these huge cooling towers, and you actually can't see them from anywhere in the city, kind of in the middle of the city, unless you're up pretty high on a building or something. But from Northcliffe, you can see them, and they're so far away that they're tiny. And the first time I went up onto Northcliffe and actually took a good look at the city, I was completely blown away. I'd never realized how big Johannesburg was until I stood there, because I knew it was at the airport, and you can see the airport.
Yeah.
And you see kind of Northcliffe is towards the west of Johannesburg. And it's called Northcliffe because it faces the north, but it's actually in the west of the city. And you can go a lot further west before you start running out of city. But it's basically, when you look at Rosebank, for example, which I regard as the middle of Johannesburg, greater Johannesburg, you're quite a bit west of that. And so to be able to stand on Northcliffe and see the airport, which is totally in the east of Johannesburg, is quite amazing. And at night, you could probably see every light in the city at night from there. So I definitely wouldn't miss that if you just want to see Johannesburg, kind of get a sense of its scale. Because even after living here my whole life, I still don't really understand how big it is, and I'm sometimes shocked and surprised to find out how large it really is.
Yeah, the only time I've been to Joburg is to the airport, and when we flew out of the airport, we couldn't see much because it was cloudy, but all I could see was these buildings that just went for miles and miles, and I couldn't see where they finished. So it was difficult because it was cloudy to get a idea of the scale of it, but it looks huge, the actual area.
Yeah, it's amazing how it blends, because if you just look at Pretoria and Johannesburg, Pretoria is probably like a fourth of Johannesburg's size. But if you actually look at the map, driving on the highway from Johannesburg to Pretoria, at no point you cross over. There's buildings, all along the way. And at some point it's going to converge. It's not quite there yet, but you can almost think of it as one city. I mean, when I think about going to Pretoria, I do not feel like I'm really going to another city. It's next door. And I could even imagine it being a cohesive one thing. So it's an incredibly vast place. If somebody were to ask me to describe Johannesburg in terms of another city, I would probably say it's like Los Angeles, in the sense that you have everything everywhere. So you have an office building, a medium-sized office building in the middle of nowhere. It's the only thing that's tall in that area. That's one of the strangest things about Johannesburg, is you have a city center, which is like a traditional, skyscraper-like city. Usually when it's those types of cities, it tends to be that and outlying areas, but that's it. Johannesburg has a city like that, and then it has a huge, vast area, which is, houses, and then also skyscrapers, and there's an area called Randburg, which is close to where I live, and it has, little mini skyscrapers, not super tall, but big enough that you can see them from other parts of the city. So when you look at the city, horizontally, it's actually quite strange. You have skyscrapers, and then you have nothing, and then you have like one skyscraper, and then you have nothing again. You have a couple of more skyscrapers, and then you've got, just horizontal development. So it's quite strange, but it's a lot like Los Angeles in the sense that it's spread over this vast area, and all development tends to be, kind of towards the horizon rather than vertically.
Yeah.
which I think is a waste of space. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a unique place. It's a great place to live because it has a bit of everything, and it's not very convenient. There's not a great public transportation system. You kind of have to go everywhere by car, or hope that where you want to go is just along the new subway line. But there's a lot to explore. You could live here I've lived here all of my life, and I have no idea where everything is. I have a very vague sense of, what's off in this direction, what's off in this direction. And one of my favorite things to do is just take my bike and just decide on a direction and just ride out there. And I'll often I'll often discover things and ask myself, how did I not know for 26 years that this was here? And that happens very often. That happens weekly. So it's a very large area. I know it's not very famous internationally insofar as South Africa goes. Everybody knows Cape Town, for example. Johannesburg doesn't really have that much from a tourist perspective, but I think that's more because even people who live here don't really know what the city has. So that might be one of the reasons why. It's something like that, I think.
Are you all right for time, Ed?
Yeah, sure.
Are you sure?
I'm okay.
I've just got a couple more questions, if you don't mind.
No problem. Go ahead and ask me. Let's hear it.
If somebody was coming to Joburg and they were really interested in the history of sort of the apartheid era,
yes,
what would be the things that you would recommend that they saw?
I would say definitely Nelson Mandela's house in Soweto. The Apartheid Museum, which is close to Gold Reef City, actually. So if you go to the Gold Reef City, either the casino, Gold Reef City, or the theme park, which is the same complex, it's fairly close to that. I'm not exactly sure where it is. It's a very interesting museum because of the way it was designed. So when you get your ticket, I know that it's randomly generated, and it'll say white or black or something like that. And then there'll be two different gates, and you'll have to go through whichever one it says you are. So it's a very interesting concept because I think it really captures the kind of what it was really like.
Yeah.
If you're white, you would this is for white people, that's for black people. So it generates a ticket like that, and based on of whichever ticket you get, you go through that portion of the museum. And then I've never been inside, but I can imagine it probably lines up, photographs and things from the era. Strangely, it's not very popular, I think. I think people more or less just want to get away from the past in South Africa. So it's not too popular with locals, I can imagine.
No, I can imagine it wouldn't be.
Yeah, certainly I don't hear people discussing it. I've heard, I know those details because I've heard it. But I think most people aren't interested in visiting it and don't. But I think it's an interesting experience if you do, and probably quite necessary. And then there's Nelson Mandela's house in Soweto, which I mentioned, which is a tiny house where he lived, which is now a museum. But there's really not much there. The house is small, and it's the type of place you go there and you'll probably spend 10 or 15 minutes there, and then you'll kind of be done. That'll be it. I don't know if what's around the house, if the surrounding area has anything to do, but it's not the type of place you can expect to go out for a day. If you want to go there, make sure it's part of your schedule for the day, one of many things, because it's a small kind of just a unique historical attraction. There's not much there. Interesting to see, but you're going to be spending about 10 minutes there. Gandhi's house is in Johannesburg, a house where he stayed, which I think a lot of people don't know. I have no idea what it looks like, but I know it's in Johannesburg. So that might be interesting. There's a Museum of African Art in the city itself. It's not so much history, but it's like art history maybe. There are probably more, but by far the most famous one is the Apartheid Museum. Gandhi's house is not so famous, but I think internationally it's an historically important place. A lot of people don't know that he stayed in Johannesburg or had a house here. Mandela's house, and then there are a lot of museums in Johannesburg if you can find them. Basically everything: science history, trains, vehicles, the political history, art history. Yeah, they're not famous, but we have a lot of them in Johannesburg. That's one thing about Johannesburg, because it's spread out over such a vast area. We have absolutely everything.
Mm.
Climbing gyms, yoga studios, anything you like, you have it. Yeah, I think the Apartheid Museum is probably the most famous one.
Yeah, people keep asking me about that lately. I've noticed a lot of the children, well, the teenagers that I teach. I'm not sure if it's coming in the
Yeah,
schools in their history or something, but it seems
right,
to be because obviously they know that I'm interested in South Africa, and
right.
it seems to be something that people are constantly asking me about. There must be, isn't it, from
I think it's
somewhere?
because it dominates our history.
Mm,
When you think about South Africa, what do you think about? It's apartheid.
mm,
Every nation is based on a myth or a legend. For South Africa, that myth or legend is that we had this social system and it was overcome, and kind of we still got a lot of problems, but now you have people who are once going to go to war with each other, and they're living together, they're
yeah,
walking the same streets, they're eating in the same restaurants, and there was almost war here. A lot of people don't realize that. When Chris Hani was assassinated in the 90s, that was very close to a major conflict. I don't know quite if you could call it war, but it would have been something that looks a lot like it.
mm,
And that was avoided somehow. And so there are a lot of problems here, and it's interesting that I called it a myth, because it kind of is. A lot of people would argue that not much has changed, which is kind of half untrue, half true. Depends what you look at. It's a complex topic,
yeah.
but it dominates our history. It dominates that whole idea, and that's probably why it's as famous as it is. It's the museum for that time, and that is the time that everybody thinks about when they think about this country. And it's an ongoing saga, but it's the kind of the prominent characteristic
Mm.
of this nation.
Which is a shame in some ways because it's not.
Yeah,
South Africa's got
it
so many great things about
right.
it.
I think that's what most people locally think. That's why most people probably don't attend that museum of any race. People want to get on with it.
Yeah.
Whoever they are, they want to solve whatever problem they have, and they want to enjoy their lives. They don't.
Which is the
Nobody.
right attitude to have, yeah.
Right, and I think most people have it here, and for that reason, I think people are glad it's there. They just probably wouldn't like to go there very often. Through Soweto, I think last year on my bike, and I didn't want to take my jacket because it was really hot. So I just took my gloves and I was wearing a t-shirt. It's one of the reasons I have this tan I'm always talking about. And so everybody can see I'm white because they can see my arms. And everybody looks at me when I drive through there because they probably, you just don't see a white guy coming through Soweto on a bike that often, especially very deep at the back end, kind of right through the neighborhood. But people are just delighted. They have the biggest smiles on their faces, and they greet me and they give me thumbs up. It's amazing to see, because when I was going through there for the first time, I was quite apprehensive. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't take my phone, my wallet. I was like, I'm taking nothing. Nobody's going to rob me. If there's anything for them to take, it's going to be just the bike. But I was really surprised when I went through there, because it was quite a nice city, actually. I drove through there. The roads were new. The houses were small, but they were houses. I was expecting shacks. And there are shacks in some parts of Soweto, but most of the houses are real houses. And there's a shopping mall, and there's people out and about walking on the street. People are free there.
Yeah.
They walk around like they're free. They're not happy because they can do much better, and they know it, and they want it. But they are happy and they are free. They walk outside of their houses, and they're going to go where they want to go, and they're going to do whatever they want to do, and they're not going to allow anybody to say no to them. And you can see it. And when somebody comes through there, like me, I'm a white guy coming through there on a bike, people were extremely happy to see me. They were fascinated by me. And they were just happy that someone dared to come in there, because they're not. They probably kind of giggle at the idea that people are scared of them. are scared to go into those areas because it's, you know, the bad area. It's honestly not that bad. And now I drive through there no problem. Mostly just to get the attention, because you get so much attention. Everybody's waving at you and looking at you. So they are really delighted to see people go there. And it's changed my whole perception. When I was growing up in Johannesburg in the 90s, there was an extreme crime wave going around. It was the most dangerous time, and you just grow up with a certain view of everything that's around you. That has been completely destroyed by that one bike ride through there, and I now regularly drive through these areas, feeling completely safe. And much more free than I did before. I see the whole Johannesburg as one place where I can go. Previously, I thought, that's a no-go area, don't go there. That's a no-go area, don't go there. I do not feel like there are no-go areas for me now. I go where I want, I do what I want, and I feel free to do so. And that's been a combination of language study and just exploring those areas. I study the languages, and that when I speak with people, I get a kind of an instant connection, and they're just very happy to see me and talk with me. And I feel like I'm almost like I'm one of them. You know what I mean? And then just exploring the areas in general, just seeing this place is really not so bad. I would walk through Soweto. It was nice. The streets were open and clean and paved. Alexandra is very different. That's the very bad area in Johannesburg. I probably wouldn't walk there. Even driving through on the bike, that's an area that has serious problems. But the funny thing is, Soweto not so long ago looked like that. I think a lot of the people that live in the outlying areas, some of the worst areas, probably dislike Soweto because of its fame, has gotten a disproportionate amount of money spent on it to develop it, which is why it probably looks as good as it does. It's been, you know, it's the famous area in Johannesburg which resisted apartheid. It has the most citizens of this city. It's got, I think, something like 4 million or something like that. That's half of the city. And so it makes sense that a lot of money would be spent there, but like places like Alexandra have been neglected in favor of places like Soweto. So there are problems. There are problems. That's unmistakable. But it somehow doesn't seem, for me, as someone who's been through these areas and have explored it, it somehow doesn't seem so bad anymore. It doesn't terrify me as much as it used to. I feel like it's not. My view has completely changed. People tend to assume the worst when they hear the stories about these areas. And I've been through them, and I feel like I would go through them again, and I regularly do. And I would encourage other people to try and go there, because they'll find it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're willing to learn their language as well, I think is it's not language.
That is right. Yeah, that's a complete game changer for them.
Yeah.
Their whole attitude changes towards you. People in general, people are friendly with you no matter what. Depends on the individual. But when you speak with a large group of people, it can affect the group mood. I went to, there is an area at the back end of Soweto. It's called Dobsonville. It's one of the not so nice areas of Soweto. There's a large African market there, and there's a large contingent of African immigrants living there among the local population. And when I walked through there, I was the only white guy there, and I was walking there. So I parked my bike at one point. I was walking through the market, and it felt like the whole village's eyes was on me. Everybody's looking at me, and people seemed very suspicious. They were kind of like, what is this? What is this? What does he want here? What's he looking for? But I started chatting with a couple of young men who were standing on the side of the road. Probably, I think they were high school boys. And initially there was just 2 or 3 of them. And I was walking by them, and I thought, I should try and comment something just to try and get the practice. This was in the early days of my studying. And I somehow managed to, I'm always looking to show off. So I know a little bit of the language. So I'll see a Russian girl, I'll try and go up to her and say, my little bit of Russian, try and impress her. So I saw these 3 guys, and I always, when I try and speak to somebody, they'll get these huge smiles on their faces, even if you know very little. Because one of the reasons I like to study languages which are not very famous, like a lot of people study French, Spanish, Portuguese, and so those languages are kind of famous. But if you study a little language like Zulu or Armenian or something like that, you'll get a big reaction out of people. In addition to it just being kind of interesting. So I spoke with these kids, and very quickly, before I realized, it was a group of like 8 kids. So their friends, you know, somehow joined in, and before long they were laughing, and they were, you know, this was becoming a scene. And eventually it was a whole group, and it wasn't long before that whole market knew that I spoke Zulu, and everybody wanted to come and see me and shake my hand and talk to me. So it was just an incredible experience. I remember just thinking about it for days afterwards. I would just sit at home and think what an amazing day that was. So, I mean, a reaction like that, you've got to, it's as close as you can come to being famous, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they just don't experience people going there in general. For somebody to go there and then talk in Zulu, I mean, that's for them very, very unusual. And you get extremely positive reactions. And then you're so motivated to come back home and study again and to go back. And that's why I said it's completely changed my view of the place. I now view it as a place where there are just regular people as opposed to kind of threats. That's how I saw it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really strongly advocate people to travel, not so much travel necessarily, but just explore, even your own city. Because people, when you say the word travel, people think of long distance travel. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be exploring your own city. But going somewhere where you otherwise wouldn't go, experiencing things you otherwise wouldn't experience. And then studying languages is a way of exploring as well for me.
Yeah,
when I study languages, I explore. Yeah. I've studied, you know, little languages like Armenian for no other reason that I want to explore it. I want to know something about it. And the rewards it pays are, you know, kind of priceless. It's something I cannot put. I tell people I'm rich because I feel like I am. I feel like the languages make me rich. I can do things which other people can't do, only because they don't study, because they're not interested in learning it necessarily, which is fine. But I can, the difference between me now and before I studied languages is something I cannot describe to people. The confidence I have, the stuff I can do, I cannot think of anything that so, you know, powerfully motivates you to be confident in language studying. Because if I didn't speak and I went there, I would kind of feel like I shouldn't be there, which is a shame.
Yeah.
After I could speak, I felt like I definitely belonged there, especially with all the people around me encouraging me and everything. So, yeah.
You're gonna have to teach me Zulu now as well as Afrikaans.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely worth learning, I think. Even if you just know a little bit.
Yeah. That was my plan actually. I was to do Afrikaans, Zulu, and French, and then it all kind of it got a bit much for the 3 languages.
Yeah, you got to kind of take one at a time, I think. Which is hard sometimes because you just want everything now.
You do.
Right, yeah, but one problem that I found with language learning is once I realized I could get a huge reaction out of somebody with a little bit of language, I would try and study a little bit of every language, which is impossible. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's good to get into the habit of language learning and not view it as kind of, let me do this and finish it, because if you try and do that, it's too hard.
Yeah,
but if you kind of just do it as a habit, so I study language in general, it's my hobby, it's my habit, it's what I do, then it's kind of, you start to enjoy it more over the long term, and you see amazing results. And it's just something I now cannot imagine just not studying. There used to be a time when I hated it. I just wanted to be over. But now that I realize how it works, I just want to do it all the time. And that's kind of how you develop in language learning.
Well, thank you so much. I've taken up more of your time than planned, but it's so interesting.
No, it's no problem. I really enjoy talking about this. I probably talk too much about it. But yeah, I love this kind of stuff. So you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Tilly.
See you soon.
See you soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.